Hello everyone, my name is Mohammad Ayaz Khan and currently I'm working as editor at Aki Diaries. And in this interview, we are going to talk about the autumn 2020 workshops that we are offering at Aki Diaries. In many ways, COVID 19 has changed a lot of aspects that we deal with, and education, and particularly higher education, has also been affected. And on the other hand, it has also opened up a new world of online workshops and opportunities to learn from tutors across the world, across the globe, and sit in on your homes and learn new skills and new softwares and new design processes which earlier you perhaps did not have chance to. So, with these objectives, last summer we started workshops, and we did successful completion of workshops under the title Summer 2020. We offered workshops in computational design, in which there was a very good response from the participants, and you can go on our Akidiaries page, which is www.akidiaries.com, and over there under the archive section you can see what kind of work that was done by the participants, and you can also see the testimonials. The idea and the objective behind this interview is to talk about the autumn 2020 workshops, which we have very recently launched. And these workshops are again offering participants to learn computational design in a much more structured and a much more coordinated way. In the autumn 2020, we are offering currently three workshops. First workshop is titled as Grasshopper as a Tool, in which in this interview we are mainly going to talk about the first workshop. The second and the third workshops will also be talked about in subsequent live streamed videos that we are going to do and which will be announced on our pages. Uh, now, in this autumn 2020, as I said, we are offering three workshops. And before I go into the detail of the first workshop, I would like to introduce our tutor who is here with us, Adnan Magda. Adnan, welcome on this interview. Let me just briefly briefly introduce Adnan here. Adnan has completed his architecture from SET University Ahmedabad, and he has a special interest in combining technology with architecture. He is currently running a startup known as Architect that focuses on applying artificial intelligence to the fields of architecture and design. For his research, he is currently also associated with Google AI. Adnan has done his internship from a prestigious Renzo Piano Building Workshop, and he has also won many awards such as Ultratech Building for Billion and Polar Students Awards. Adnan, welcome on the show, on this
Thank you so
interview.
much for the introduction and hi everyone.
Yeah. So, Adnan, we had a very successful round under the summer 2020, and over there we addressed the issues of the computational design in a much more detailed way. In the autumn 2020, we have decided to offer three workshops, which are, let's say, a bit relaxed for the students. And in this workshop, we are going to talk about the first, in this interview, we want to talk about the first workshop, which is, let's say, titled as Grasshopper as a Tool. Can you briefly talk about what all are the things that you are going to cover in this workshop?
So basically, the first workshop is intended for participants who are going to use probably Rhino and Grasshopper for the first time, or they have very little knowledge of Rhino and Grasshopper, and then they are just starting out, right? So the topics that we'll be talking about will be based on keeping that aspect in. The other aim of the workshop is to explain Rhino and Grasshopper's core concepts, right? So the logic behind how Rhino and Grasshopper works should be very clear by the end of this workshop. So we'll be starting with introducing Rhino first of all. So basic layouts of Rhino, how do you do rendering in Rhino, how do you take 2D plans, sections, whatever you are designing. How do you annotate it? How do you represent it? Various surface tools, mesh tools, surface editing tools, geometry editing tools, all of them will be covered there. Once we are done with basics of Rhino, then we'll slowly move towards Grasshopper. So Grasshopper again is based on a NUMS software that is Rhino. So we'll be talking about what are NUMS software, what are meshes softwares, and what is the difference between a NUMS software and a mesh software. Then in Grasshopper, we'll be talking about various components. Grasshopper in itself is a visual scripting uh, platform, which then allows us to use various inbuilt components. So we'll be talking about math components, set components, again surface components, mesh components, display components. We'll be talking about vectors in detail and all of that. Uh, in the second step of this workshop, we'll then slowly move towards data structures. Now, data structures are very important, and most of the time, you'll have problems in data structures itself. So, we'll be taking data structure in depth in this workshop. So, when do you flatten a tree? When do you simplify a tree? When do you graft a tree? How do you clean trees? How do you change path of the trees? All of that will be talked in great depth using various scripts, real life scenarios like making facades, installations, sculptures, all of that. In the second, in the once we are done with barebones grasshopper, which is like the native grasshopper, then we'll use a few plugins that students will be using most of the time in their practice. So one of the important use of grasshopper is in fabrication. So how do you fabricate something using grasshopper? What is the workflow there? We'll be talking about a plugin which is known as OpenNest, which allows us to panel things. Then it allows us to orient our panels in certain way. It allows us to automatically align our panels on the sheet. It optimizes our sheets in such a way that we use minimum material and all of that. Once we have talked about fabrication, again, which involves CNC, laser cutting, a little bit of 3D printing, we'll then move towards kinetic structures. So Grasshopper again allows us to create kinetic structures. Once we have done scripting for kinetic structures, it's very important to represent those kinetic structures. So we'll see how we can create animations using Grasshopper and Premiere Pro for our kinetic structures. And in the last part, we'll move towards Kangaroo. Now, Kangaroo is a physics simulation plugin. So we'll start learning Kangaroo with catenary experimentation of Gaudi's. So we'll see the rope experiment. Then we'll see how we can create catenary or funicular shells. Once we are done with catenary and funicular shells, we'll then move towards packing algorithms and reaction diffusion algorithms. Packing algorithms and diffusion algorithms are again two very important algorithms that we can work with in Kangaroo. So people who might have seen these installations or something like that mostly use reaction diffusion algorithm or mesh relaxation algorithms that that use Kangaroo underneath. And then we'll be in the last part before concluding, we'll see terrain modeling. So most of the time, people when they have to use 3D create 3D terrains or something, they use GIS. We'll see how we can use Terrain Party, which is a website which gives us height maps, how we can convert height maps into terrain models. And then we'll also see how we can create a 3D fabrication model or something like that out of terrain models. And we'll also introduce ELK. ELK is a plugin which is based on open source information from OpenStreetMaps. So we can create 3D buildings automatically, 3D roads, bridges, shops, all of that with proper data structure. And then we'll conclude the workshop with the last session wherein I'll talk about how students who have learned all of these plugins can then take this forward. And yes, that is a brief of how the workshop will be.
Yes, it sounds quite intensive and quite extensive range of topics that we are talking about. Can you tell us how exactly are we going to conduct this workshops in terms of what will be the tools that we'll be using? Are there going to be some tutorials, some exercises that the students will be required to do, etc.?
Yes, so this workshop will heavily rely on Rhino and Grasshopper, but then at the end of each session, assignment will be given, and students will have to practice this assignment. And in the next session, we'll spend half an hour discussing doubts of those assignments. So after each session, an assignment will be given, and in the first half an hour, we'll be discussing the doubts of those assignments. And that is how we have planned the workshop as of now.
Yeah. So basically, students have a chance to learn by doing and not just listen and talk, right?
Yeah.
It's not like a.
In
It's
the
not.
sessions also, all the scripts that we are doing, the students will do it side by side. Plus, they will have an extra chance of doing the assignment where they'll practice whatever we have learned in class on their own. That is how we have formulated this workshop.
Yeah. So it's not like that it is just a conference where you just sit and talk. The idea here is that you learn by practicing these softwares, and there are small time problems. There are small exercises that are given, which you practice on your own, and you come back and you solve your doubts, and that is how you actually learn. So I think it's more like a studio kind of an approach that we are talking about. It's like a mini studio in this workshop, and that sounds very interesting to me. I have one question. When we talk about these computational design, it comes to my mind that of course it's going to be very beneficial to, let's say, architecture and design fields. But do you also see, because we are talking about plugins like Kangaroo? Okay,
Mhm.
so can this workshop also be beneficial for students who come from, let's say, civil engineering background, or let's say from planning background, who can use these things like GIS and the ELK that we are talking about?
Yes, it's very true. Again, the first workshop is basically an introductory workshop. So we'll see bits and pieces of all the things. We'll be using ELK, which is like an urban planning sort of a tool. Then we'll be seeing how we are using open terrain. So all of that are basically urban planning. So when we talk about Kangaroo, it's a physics simulation tool. So it again concentrates on structural aspects of anything. For example, shell structures, installations, then testing out how a particular installation would react to loads of gravity and all of that, like different lateral forces and gravitational forces and all of that. So again, that is a structural part of it. So the aim of this workshop is to introduce participants to the whole world of computational design. It's a very introductory workshop, and it has bits and pieces from all the uh, design philosophies, or let's say design. Yeah.
So, if I am a civil engineering student, also I would be interested, because earlier when we were talking about shell structures, the kind of a process that was available to us was, first you do that chain link, then you do a kind of a form finding process through a physical model, and then you click the pictures, you reverse it in order to find the perfect form of the shell. Now, of course, it's a very nice process, and we have been exploring it in the studios. But over here, you are saying that there is a plugin available which allows you to do find catenary shapes, and it allows you to simulate that form finding process through a software. And it not only allows you to find a form, it allows you to explore multiple options with the help
Yeah.
of certain parameters that you set. Okay,
Yeah.
so I think that's a big advantage here if I'm interested in structures. Can you suppose if I am an architecture or an interior design student or an architect who has recently graduated, in what possible ways do you think it can help them? This workshop can help them. Can you take some example and talk about it?
For example, let's say, see, first of all, this computational design nowadays is used by most of the architectural practices, right? People are now increasingly using computational design. Not only, see, when I talk about computational design, the first thing that comes up to minds of students or participants is something like fluid design or parametric design or whatever these terms. computational design is not just about creating random forms or what say some very crazy forms. It boils down to very simple things at most of the time. So when our approach usually in computational design is designing with like performance based design or data driven design. Uh, for example, let's say in first workshop we had created a script wherein we had created a shell structure, again funicular shell structure using Kangaroo, but then the openings were made in such a way that it according to the solar pattern, so that the parts where there is parts where there is more solar radiation coming in, the openings are small. Parts where there are less solar radiation coming in, the openings are large. So some practical examples like this, when we had created various facade patterns in order to attain a particular form wherein the wind loads were minimum, something like this. So computational design is not always about creating crazy forms. If you are interested in very simple architecture, still you can use a lot of computational design in order to create high performance buildings.
Yes.
Yes.
So let's say if I'm an architecture student and if I'm interested in designing a facade, right, in a particular city based on the climatic data that I have, over here I can set certain parameters, right, as to what are the times of the year during which I don't want the sunlight to enter into my building, and what are the
Yes.
times of the year in which I need the sunlight to enter into the building. And now these become a set of parameters with which I start scripting, and the software starts generating options of the various possibilities that I can have for that facade. So that I think is a wonderful opportunity to my mind. Uh, uh, um, what are going to be the, can we talk about the timings, etc., because in the last summer workshop that we did, it was a very intense workshop of a continuous 14 days, and
Yes.
we had intense sessions in the morning. So this time we have kept it a little bit relaxed. So can you tell us a little bit more about what the timings are going to be, and how the practicing people and also people from the West can also join this workshop?
Yes. So basically, the time of this workshop is for like we'll have two sessions on Saturday weekends, that is Saturday and Sunday, and we are going to have 3 hour sessions on weekends. On Saturday, it will be 7 to 10 Indian Standard Time, 7 p.m. to 10 p.m., and on Sundays we are going to have 10 to 1 a.m. Again Indian Standard Time, and then on weekdays, Monday is off and Friday is off. We have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, where we are having 2 hours sessions. So people who are going to say offices or they are currently students, they have studio time, so it won't clash with any of them. So that are the basically timing on that.
I think even on the weekend days, it's isn't it going to be on the evenings?
Yes, weekends it's evening 7 to 10.
7 to 10, 7 to 10 p.m., right?
Yes.
Okay. So I think basically it allows two things to my mind. One, if I'm a student, I can attend these classes once my regular classes are over. I can also if I'm a practicing architect, if I'm working somewhere, I can also attend these workshops post office hours. So that's one thing. Is there anything else that you would like to add? Something that is important and that you think that is getting missed out?
I think most of the things we have covered. Again, we'll be just using Rhino and Grasshopper. So, people, again, for the people who are using Rhino and Grasshopper the first time, this is the workshop that you start with. And then, if you want to take your knowledge forward, we have two more workshops, which are second workshop and the third workshop. Grasshopper as a design driver and Grasshopper as a design assistant, and Grasshopper as a design driver. Probably you can take that in combination with the first workshop. But again, for the people who will be using Grasshopper for the first time, or they have very little knowledge about Grasshopper, this is the workshop that you start.
Yeah. So if I don't know anything at all about Rhino or Grasshopper, this is the workshop to be part of. That's the way I understand. And basically, this workshop will take me from nowhere to an introductory level. right? And again, an introductory level in this workshop also, it is quite an extensive thing that we are talking about, in the
Yes.
sense that once I do this first workshop, it will
Mm.
basically, make me self reliant in terms of computational
It
design.
will kind of it will kind of set a base for you
Yes.
on which you can then build your skills further,
Absolutely,
in
absolutely,
whichever direction you want to
absolutely.
go. Then.
And then the second and the third workshops that we are offering, they take you on a different plane from where you
Yes.
start demanding certain things from software. You know,
Yes.
you start commanding the software and start using it as a design assistant. You know, in your
So I
office.
just explain you briefly the why we have kept such names. So in the first workshop is named as Grasshopper as a tool. Basically, the intention of the first workshop is you have something in mind and you just want to use Grasshopper as a tool to kind of represent, to find out structure, but basically you have design in your mind. In the second workshop, what we are talking about is Grasshopper as a design assistant, where we will be talking about how Grasshopper can assist you in design, right? So, for example, we'll be using genetic algorithms and all of that. So you set some parameters, you set some evaluation criteria and all of that, and then Grasshopper can assist you to design that. Okay, probably this is not a good way. This is the way you should go, and then you produce various iterations. You find out a good iteration. Again, we'll be talking of in more detail in the next interview or interviews that we'll be doing later on. But kind of that's the idea. And in the last workshop, where we'll be using AI and all of that, the aim of that workshop is where an architect takes the back seat and the Grasshopper will design for you. Now, it might seem a little bit too much for people. I know that some of you might agree to that philosophy, some of you might not. But in overall, it's a very good process to learn how you as an architect can just set parameters and design criteria, and then you allow Grasshopper to design on its own. But yes, that's the
So,
three
so,
workshops that we
so
are doing.
we are slowly moving towards artificial intelligence, and in the last workshop, you can say that it's more about artificial intelligence in the field of architecture and design and the larger building industry. Thank you, Adnan. I think it was a very helpful session, and I hope it has helped our participants, the people who want to know more in detail about the workshops. If anyone has any query regarding the workshop, you can always get back to us through our social media pages. And also, there is a mail which I will just share, which is workshops@archidiaries.com. And we have also shared posters. The dates are also mentioned, and in that also there is a contact information. So if you need any further help in terms of clearing the doubts, please feel free to contact us, and we will come back with the second interview in this series, in which we will talk about the second workshop which just Adnan just mentioned, which is the Grasshopper as assistant, design assistant. And till then, thank you very much for joining us.